Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming here on this wonderful day. Firstly, of course, I want to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders, past, present and emerging, and also everyone who's here today, Indigenous people, First Nations people, settler people, whatever you want to call yourselves, welcome. Our panellists today for the session, Language Lives, on my furthest right, Kim Scott, the great Kim Scott, one of our greatest writers, Noongar man. And next to him, of course, Curly Saunders, incredibly creative. And when you look at Curly's CV, she does everything. Filmmaker, singer, songwriter.
No film yet, but I'll take it. You're speaking into my future, Uncle. I love that.
You are listed as a filmmaker and even a model as well. You've done everything. And Maria Lena Ellis, also one of the Arrernte Warlpiri people. We're really privileged to have you here today with us as well. And language lives, and of course, like some of us, of course, I never ever grew up with language. I did speak in Aboriginal English, and as I ventured out in the world, learned to code switch. I occasionally lapsed back into that English as well. Certain languages which were very specific to the region I grew up in, certain words as well. But it was a hybridised language, and I guess the thing that came out to me, of course, that English is malleable. There is something they speak in England, but in England, of course, there are many dialects, and of course, Aboriginal people speak versions of English, and some of us speak Creole as well. It's been said English is the world's largest Creole. It's a language which is composite, which is made up of various Romance and Germanic languages. I guess the first thing we want to talk about, of course, are First Nations languages, and all our panellists have used those languages in their creative work, and they've been part of the revitalisation of language. And of course, that's been part of our literature from the very start, and the late playwright Jack Davis, with his plays like No Sugar, made use of Noongar languages in those plays, and when you look at the productions, and the scripts, of course, they had glossaries. And Kim Scott, a Noongar man, of course, has continued that. And Kim, I wonder if you could just speak in the first instance of why you became, I guess, identified with the plight of Aboriginal languages, the First Nation languages, and the desire to include it in your creative work, but also to be part of a larger social process of bringing those languages back.
Thank you, Philip. Bit by bit, I'd say. May be relevant. We just started with language. I also want to acknowledge the old people where we are here. And there's a Noongar Bessie Flowers came over from Albany in the 19th century to this area, and as a teacher at an Aboriginal mission, and her writing very early on is very, very fluent, very literate in English, and late in her life you can see she has a global perspective. She's experienced racism and is complaining about it. But none of that is in Noongar language. I wanted to start with that, partly to talk about the old people around us in the land and to try and get some connections happening. But also that she was using English because that's functional, and she took pleasure in that. So my own way of working toward Noongar English, I didn't grow up speaking it. A little handful of words, I would say, in the suburb where I grew up. But a lot of my, increasingly with the writing in English, the literary writing, one realises it's frustrations. You're trying to make the language do something else, speak about who you are, and so forth. And it occurred to me, it became apparent to me that Noongar language was a key to that. Now there's dilemmas within language revival, I think, to get the purity of that old language versus getting a language that we can all share in a contemporary sort of sense. I find myself, maybe, I don't know why, gravitating to that sort of classic, trying to locate and revive a classical Noongar language, partly because of parallels with, I think, what happened in Europe in discovering Greek and Latin and the cultural blossoming from that. So I kind of hope that that might be possible. And the idea of communicating with ancestors, as silly as that might sound, and with country. I believe the idea that these many ancient languages across the continent, so connected to place, you know, place is part of the text, it seems apparent, can help with that. The decolonisation can help with healing, and will inform some other sort of cultural blossomings. And when I look at this long answer, so when I look at first contact of Noongar people, especially on the south coast, and I see how, as I've said before, how talented, how generous, how humane, how cross-culturally sophisticated they were, it must be language that's giving them, helping them take those qualities. So there's a bunch of reasons, I think.
Curly, you're a Gunai woman, and one of your, I guess, most esteemed books, Bindi, which won the Daisy of Tomorrow Prize. You used language in that, didn't you? What were you thinking about when you were doing that?
Yeah. Sorry. So I was born and raised on Gundungurra land, and the language within that book is Gundungurra language. And it's the language that my grandmother carried and taught and had a legacy to teach. And I watched Auntie Val be this leader in our community speaking language, and people coming along to learn it, to be able to embed it maybe in their workplaces at council or in their schools, teach the kids the colours of, you know, different colours or numbers. But beyond that, the application seemed pretty simple. And I am one of the most fluent language speakers of Gundungurra, and I don't have people to speak it with in conversation. And so I wanted to be able to weave this character in, this young Bindi who had these experiences with language as an everyday part of her yarn, and who spoke words almost like Creole. So within Bindi, words are woven in contextually, and there is a word list at the back of the book. But I wanted to create something that would enable students to be able to imagine themselves, especially black kids, to imagine themselves in this future where they have language and where they teach it. And now more and more that's happening in our classrooms. And when I'm teaching kids, you know, I might see them for different projects across different years, and I'll catch up with them next time and they'll have more language, and the next time again, more and more. So I wanted Bindi to be that. I think also what you speak about, Kim, with the reality of language being inextricable from land and us being inextricable from both of those things, means that when we're giving our kids these words, we're giving them back part of themselves, and also access to have, you know, communion with the land and with their identity in a different way, and with their ancestors. You know, we're always telling them that, and I was taught this by the Morris kids, who I've learnt from who carry the Chapmans, Granny Chapman's language of Tharawal down the coast on the east coast in New South Wales. And they would say, if you don't know the language words, just talk to that thing anyway, and eventually you might learn the language word, but also you'll be communing anyway, you're having conversation anyway. So they walk along like, hey there, tree, how are you today? You're looking deadly, I like you, you're looking very good there, nice and strong there, I like how you're giving the home to that bird. And then they'll keep going, hello tree, how are you today? And eventually they learn that name is Kundu. G'day Kundu, how are you today? And then G'day turns into Walawani. Walawani Kundu, you know, and then an introduction. And they have a basis that can be added and expanded upon. And I think that's an interesting part of language teaching and learning in the place that we're existing in, because we are so often reconstructing something that's 250 years old from these documents, but we're also trying to create something that is contemporary, where kids can use it in their everyday experience and carry that forward, so that when we're gone, just like my Auntie Val has passed, somebody will be able to continue that language, and it will be applicable to them and there where they are. And the more that we're having buildings knocking down trees, the more we're going to need a word for building and not tree.
Marielena, you speak several languages. How many languages do you speak?
First of all, I'm going to kankam randare gonna na mananula rolling jama bagana Ta kona kanga jata ko te cheno kona. Yung kona angkama a church u rectory ni mapaka kulen mapaka. Nuna ira angkam. Mararan tarakanalo. English is my 6 or 7 language. That I grew up, blessed to grow up in Central Australia. My mother's language is Aranda, and my father's language is Warlpiri. Because of the intertribal marriages, I've got cousins and, from the next tribe and, next neighboring tribe. Growing up speaking my language is like, just come natural. It's like, like you fellows learn about English and grow up in that setting. But learning different languages, just have that time to sit down and just listen to the sound, the rhythm of that language. It's almost musical. Our language is not something that was forbidden. A language is who we are, where we come from. It's from the country. It's from the country that we stand upon that land, because it's who we are, where we come from. Language is important. It's important part of our daily life, communication. Any given day I'll be talking to my cousin in Warlpiri, it's an everyday thing. We doesn't phrase me at all. And sometimes I mix Aranda and Warlpiri together. But yeah, English, I've learned that in school. The first time I went to school, I was like 10, 11, because most of my growing up was out on country. My grandparents were my teachers. That's their role that they played. So going to a Catholic school, I'm an end product of a Catholic education, and I went to school, and I learned the first nursery rhyme was Humpty Dumpty. Oh my God, that nearly gave me a heart attack. I got a fright. I went home after listening to Humpty Dumpty. That big egg was sitting up there, and he fell down, and he cracked himself. I went home to my nana and my mom, and I was like, oh my God, Mom, they got Eggling England there, and he's sitting up there, they dressed him up, he got face and all that, and an egg. And he's sitting there like wall, and he even fall down and crack himself, like, and like for me, that was like that's my first culture shock in English thingy story. That I was tormented. And that nursery rhyme, I tell you. Yeah, I still remember that like it happened yesterday. And then I was so scared. I was scared to go back to school to learn about what next. The nursery rhyme coming from another overseas country there. And they're bringing it to, proper thing in my brain and my imagination. But yeah, learning that, like, listening to that nursery rhyme was, oh my goodness. As a 10-year-old, I was like, what's going on? They got 8 people in England. And I've been thinking, well, all the king's horses and men were going to rescue me, but is that egg that part of the royal family or what? I didn't know they got royal family, like, egg shape. So, yeah.
Sometimes we wish they did.
That was my evaluation of Humpty Dumpty. Don't get me started on Jack and Jill. Look like sister having a good time, yeah? Oh, I forgot to mention I'm a comedian as well. You're making me blush. Oh, give me a minute. Let me get back. So language is important. We need that language to learn and to read the country. So when it's winter time and before the winter season comes, we've got insects and animals and birds and stuff that show us the winter. We read the land for winter. We don't go to Channel 7 or Channel 9 for the weatherman to tell us. We know our weather from reading the country. And when you see the changes on country, the air, the sunrise, sunset, everything about it, it tells you what it's going to be. So, you know, learning about what season we're going to go hunting for, what available, you know, food and, you know, to go hunting for and what to gather. Season is important. And for ceremony, the singing and dancing and teaching and talking to our kids around the campfire. When kids are listening around the campfire, they're learning as well. And that's how I grew up, just listening to my grandfathers telling the stories of old and ancient. That's where I got hungry to learn more. And I said, one day I'm going to be a storyteller. And look at me, I'm sitting right up here telling you of this story. Thank you.
I think we all feel we're very privileged, of course, to be sitting with someone who speaks innumerable languages. Something seems to be emerging, but of course the importance of language in terms of connection to country, and also the importance for young Indigenous people of language in, I guess, enhancing, developing a sense of self and belonging and pride in this being Australian and being a First Nations person. Kim, you've used language quite sparingly but very precisely, and that I heard that in the earlier session about precision, very precisely in your books. Could you just tell us why you're choosing certain phrases that I remember quite clearly? Sometimes it just emerges as a use of language.
Yeah, look, probably like many Indigenous writers, early on it's the pleasure in learning a few words, a few phrases, being able to write them down. In one novel, Benang, I don't think I used very much except the word in the title, and the last line in that book, "We are still here, Benang," it being a name for an ancestor as well as the word for tomorrow. That seemed to make a lot of sense. However, in the last novel, all those years ago that I wrote, Taboo, I didn't use Noongar language. I just used phrases like the old tongue, you know, the old people's words and so on. And that was, I think, and I'm still sort of working this out, so forgive me, and I don't mean to offer it as a critique of anything anyone's doing. But increasingly I sense these languages are a major denomination in the currency of identity and belonging. You know, they potentially will anchor a shimmering nation state to its continent. But the people have to be in there as well. And it concerns me and discomforts me and makes me think, what am I doing when I see well-educated, affluent, white people using Noongar language, respectfully and all that. They think they're being respectful at home. And I know so many of us are struggling to regain the language. And it's our older generations have been punished for it, and they've been filled with shame, which is worse, I think. It's confusion there. And so those, especially that business of a settler colony, getting a sense of identity and belonging from Indigenous languages, and the true heirs, inheritors of that language, haven't got it back yet. And it seems to me then it's same old power relationship, same old sort of greed, same old grab, and better that group rather than the rest of us. So that sort of informs the way I work with stuff a little bit. In the novels, I use it partly to create that desire, to entice and lure is how I think of it, and to help make space. And it has been up until quite recently to try and to increase the sense of the importance of these languages. But now I'm thinking, oh, what is the right way to do it? Because the whole thing's changed around so rapidly, and I'm you know, I love it's great respect for little community that I know, you know, subset of the wider Noongar community where there's trust and those things. I want those people to learn the language. And then I also become aware, sorry to be taking up time here, in terms of, so you want to develop a curriculum from an endangered language, there's a great pressure to just speed it up and fill the gaps. Whereas, as I was saying in the previous session, and I don't mean this to big note, but it's you know, lucky to have some elders giving us a few recordings and writing words out and giving us a clue how to say them. And it's a dialect thing, you know, it's very regional, and you come to understand. I know these older siblings, they all speak Noongar language slightly differently because they've been moving, you know, it's a big community and they're moving from one to the other. So in that sort of way, yeah, the novels, it's one sort of thing to lure, entice, to make space. But then my own feeling is I want to keep the trust, and I want to use it for healing, because it's quite hard on the psyche, I think, early regaining language. You know, have I got it right? And we are an oppressed community, and we tend to, you know, be a bit nasty to one another sometimes, and language can become another tool like that. So I think it's got to be part of trust. It's got to, you know, slowly, and I'm increasingly working on lesser language learning through a curriculum, but a handful of language artefacts, song and story, that they connect to topographical features. And so you've got a community that belongs there, or should belong there, did belong there, however you want to phrase that, bringing back, as I've said other times, we remake ourselves from the inside out, learning some of these sounds that I never grew up with. So if there's an answer there, somewhere in there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's obviously important about, you're talking about the embodiment of languages within the Indigenous people, within First Nations, and that for many of us, of course, language has been hostage to the non-Aboriginal linguists who've done something very important and marvellous work in preserving. But of course, I think what we're seeing is a process of it moving back. And Curly, you spoke of the challenge of being the sole speaker of a language and your work with younger people. Would you like to respond to some of the things Kim's been saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely not the sole speaker, but I would say I'm one of very few, yes, and one of the more fluent, yeah, within that group of few. And so that comes with its own complications, because then you have a big responsibility to go and do that. And you also have a long list of publishing deadlines to meet that, you know, and you get it, you guys get it. Yeah, I think the time sitting with elders and community and getting the language right is some of the best time that I've spent, and it's such slow time. I think my language journey, I was on the banks of Bungalee on the Shoalhaven River with the Dharawal community and Yuin community, so Adrian Webster and Jacob Morris were teaching down there, and I could hear I heard ancestors speak in language, singing in language for the first time, and I thought I was going mad. And I called my auntie up, and I'm like, Auntie, hey, I've got these, I'm hearing voices. And she's like, oh, that's good. What are they saying? I said, what? I think I'm losing it. And she's like, nah, what are they saying? I said, I don't know, because it's all in language. And she said, well, that's what they're saying. And then we had those poets sit and teach with the elders on country and support children in teaching poetry and teaching language. And that became expanded into a program around endangered species like the black cockatoo on Gundungurra country. And we rolled it out across 12 different communities in partnership with the elders, and we went through the Territory, New South Wales and ACT, and worked with over 600 students across 60 workshops. So they were quite small groups of students, all First Nations students, and always outside on country teaching and learning. And then COVID happened. And so we all got locked down away from country and away from this opportunity to teach. But the thing that felt really important when on the other side of this was that it kept going. And in that time, I left my role at Red Room, but I said, if I'm leaving, you have to replace me with another black programmer, and I want this project to continue. And it's now turned into Buri Barai, which is the name for the whale, and we're researching the whale songline from Tasmania all the way up into Hervey Bay with many, many communities, and sitting with them and hearing the elders teach language about the whale song and passing the whale stories up the coast following that songline and creating song and story in language as a response. And these projects are so often arts projects. Like First Lights, which I hope we get to talk about because Kim and I also worked on that together at different times. It's so often the arts which give us the impetus to go and teach and learn language, but I do feel like it has to be mob who get to learn that first, because otherwise we're in competition in this colonial structure where more power and knowledge is sitting with our allies while our kids are missing out, and then they're always a step behind, not just in education and health and employment and well-being, but now also in cultural knowledge and language. So yeah, that was the intention of that program.
So we're seeing a movement through the arts to the community now. And is there still a role for the non-Indigenous linguists in all this? What were they doing?
They did a good job writing it down, eh? And I think I want to acknowledge that the language that we get to learn now on my side of the family is because all of the knowledge of Protection Board, the government, recording things across the Bungyanda mission in Lake Tyers or around Sale at Ramayak or, up near Purfleet and Taree or on Tharawal and Bidjigal country or around Katoomba. All of that knowledge is because all of the linguists' knowledge is the stuff that we are stirring back up again with the knowledge of what our old people have told us at different times. And on the East Coast, colonial impact has definitely had its play in handing that on. But I do think now we're finding our own way of documenting our languages, which are true to the sounds that we can make ancestrally, that our voices make. And we're starting to, I love when I get to sit with, keep mentioning those boys down the coast because they've taught me Tharawal and Gumia Tharawal grammar, which helped me go and sit with the Matthews Dictionary and with the Jim Barrett's iteration of this Matthews Dictionary of words, this record of words, language words in Gannagara. And because I know the grammar there, I could figure out the right way to organise it here. So we need linguists, we need black linguists to help us stir up these white recordings, and better still, we need to go further as far back as we can, listening to those old people singing and speaking language. Yeah.
One of the most remarkable people I guess I've met in respect to Aboriginal languages, of course, has been Lionel Fogarty. And once Lionel said to me, he sees language quite different to how many of us would see it. It's actually it has density, it has depth. And he talked once of a word that was given to him by an elder, so it was like something precious, one word. And I think within the secular world we use language carelessly, and to be cool is to be even more careless. And I think we've experienced sitting here with Maria Elena today, of course, something of the power of language. And I wonder if you could just, out of your own inspiration, talk to us more about language, as you understand it. Maybe you can. Could you speak some phrases from the various languages for us?
All right, this way I get you, audience, to participate. I learn your language, you learn mine now. Fair? I never hear him up yet. Okay, when we say hello, we say wada. And then you say Daganaram. It's like, hello, what are you doing? Okay? And we say, where are you going? It's like, Dunanadam. Okay. Too easy for you, Mom. Okay. Cat. Repeat after me. All right? Cat in English, in Aranda, we say, Aknatarga targa. Let's try it again. No giggling. Focus. Akatarga. Really? Some of you are swearing there. So other languages like similar. Like you have to say it, you got to use your tone of voice, your body language, and who you're talking to. It's really difficult. Because some of your audience that I could hear that you was like talking about anatomy there. Okay? You got to be careful. All right? I don't know what's going on in Yumaba's head, but yeah. Language can be hard and language can be easy. Language can be challenging. Language can be everything that you want. It's the quickest way to learn language. I don't want to give out my secret now. I'll start charging you up now. I got an ABN and I'm not afraid to use it. Okay, the easy way to learn language is like you need to close your eye. Why am I sitting there looking at me? I'm asking you, close your eyes. Well, sister, you're right. Close your eye, close your mouth, open your ears. So when I say it once, you repeat without thinking, okay? We're going to try it now for the cat. And I want to hear that loud voice. Ready? Perfect. Some of you got it. You were still talking about your anatomy there. But that's okay. Perfect. That's how easy it is to learn language. If you can shut your mouth, open your ears, and close your eyes, and listen to us, Mob. Listen to our language. Listen to our problems. Listen to what's out there. Listen to our plea for help. Some of us need help. But those of us that have this language strong, we want to support and encourage. And that's what being every person is. It's like we share everything. We carry that coulement of knowledge. Some of you might have that PhD, a piece of paper, say you're doctor in this, this, and that. We have our own. We carry our coulement of knowledge. And we carry that, and it's invisible. We wear it up here. And for me, being out in the Walpole, coming from the desert, my time and whatnot is all about sharing and to encourage. That's what we're all about. We don't take words or steal anything and everything because we can't steal that language. It doesn't belong to us, but we'll steal it anyway. We don't work like that unless you're related to the next tribal people. And I met two people here all the way from Western Australia, and they connected and they know my son. Because my son married over there in Derby in Western Australia. We got that instant connection of family. Here in the city, country, Nam. How amazing is that? We have that connection. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Vice versa. But your language is important. Language it tells you who you are and where you come from. You stand tall and proud. And I love softball, right? We love the game of softball. My community, we played softball in the 80s. And we knew the rules. We knew how to play it. So the thing that we had against the other team was our communication. We knew how to play that game. But then again, we used to make the other team nervous because we use a lot of that language on the field to where the position and where to, So that was our big advantage, using it for sport to communicate. Everything, everyday life, it's all about language. I read and write in Arundel Walpole. I'm a teacher. I'm a grandmother. I'm a mother of 5 sons and 1 daughter. Language is my passion. It's who I am. It identifies who I am, where I come from. What's most important about language is it's who you truly are. Can I thank you?
I think we're starting to get a sense of language rather than something which is utilitarian, used to manipulate, to carry out things in the world, but also language as part of your own being, but also, you know, something you were suggesting, Kim, that the First Nations languages, of course, are part of the world's great cultural heritage and have to be preserved, and the best preservation, of course, is the First Nations people to speak them. I just want to get your thoughts now, post-referendum, on what role First Nations languages could play for settler Australia. I know the language is a form of freedom from the past, a form of spiritual decolonisation. But is there a place for settler people in relation to the First Nation language? If we could just all respond as we please.
Yes, there is a place for settler people in Indigenous languages, but post-referendum, this is why some of the things I was saying before, which is, it's made me rethink, because I think I've been, look, I have a poem on our major sporting stadium in Perth in Noongar language, so I'm complicit in the thing I'm arguing against. But that was then. That was not so long after a native title deal that was a gesture towards changing things. But post-referendum, like I said before, seems to be it's a return to that same old power relationship. In my electorate, the yes vote, and I'd like to think that I've write novels, I've changed people's minds. The yes vote was 26%. So it's made me think I'll just stick with building the language, if I can, around love, trust, probably small groups of people, and like I've spoken before, trying to do it on country. Yeah, that's my response to how. But it's we'll never be a different nation unless, as I said before, the shimmering nation state is anchored by these languages that we've heard eloquently put here today. But I think, for me, it's slow it down. We're in a position of regaining ancestral language. And when the mainstream community's hungry for it at the same time, that can further exacerbate all sorts of tensions within our own community. So I don't know if that's what comes to mind in response.
Yeah, I live in a town that was a predominant yes vote, which was amazing because I spent a lot of time working on the campaign with the Uluru Dialogues and recording the stories of lots of elders and community members around that campaign. And the town I grew up in, where I speak most of the languages that I learn is Gundungurra. It was a no. And I remember crying into my pesto gnocchi. Just been like watching the tears fall out and being like, oh, it's going to be salty today, you know? And feeling so absolutely obliterated by, and I remember crying and saying to my partner, this country is so racist. This country is so racist, and him just hugging me while I'm like shuddering in tears. So I really, I felt really rattled, and I think it's because I live in a town that is interested in, that was interested in the referendum, in a way of wanting to be engaged. And I also feel like, something that I'd said before the referendum and that I feel now is that not much would really change. If we got the yes, all it would mean is that the kids going to school the next day would see that Australia believed that they would value the First Nation. It felt more of from a cultural political standpoint around the actual implementation of policies and things changing. Not a lot was actually going to change, right? But what would change would be the social, that the kids would be going to school and be seeing that people in the world cared about them and that their people mattered in some way. And so I think it's a weird world to exist in. I spent a lot of time teaching decolonisation with Shifting Ground. It's headed up by Garawa, Dr. Lily Brown and Genevieve Greaves. I get to work with them, and they're amazing, amazing people who run that organisation. And so often I'm going into spaces now and I can say, here we're teaching about occupation and colonisation. Have you got any examples of that in the world? And everybody can point to what's happening in a global conflict in Palestine right now, but people are easier to identify it there than they are in Australia. And so I have to keep being like that there, but also this here. This same thing is happening now. And so it's my hope that treaty could go away to shifting some of those attitudes in the way that we'd hope that the voice might. And each of the individual states are doing amazing things for treaty. And in Victoria, there's incredible stuff happening with treaty down here. The mob are absolutely leading the way. It's so beautiful to watch. And also, I think we're watching the voice be implemented in other places in different ways. South Australia has just implemented a voice. It's kind of like the plebiscite, you know, for queer marriage. Like, we didn't have to go and spend millions of dollars to get that thing to go, oh yeah, actually this was a good idea, we could have changed it ourselves. South Australia has just gone and done it. And so all of that is to say language and identity are definitely tied into this global political warfare that we're watching, and decolonisation and colonisation absolutely impact the way that we can teach and share language. But beneath all of the policies and all of the political warfare and the pain and the grief that mob feel and experience going through those things is still, we're still blackfellas. We still have land and we still have language, and we can continue to teach and share those languages, and it can strengthen us on our journey through those things. But it doesn't have to be necessarily tied into this. And I think so often when these things happen in the world, sorry to make this a long answer, we watch funding change. Oh, well, there was no yes vote, so now we're not going to fund those black projects, look. Or there's no treaty, so there's no relationship. We have no responsibility to fund that language thing. And so I think that's where they are interrelated. Obviously, learning language can go some of the way to undo some of the grief of existing in a settler colonial state and being oppressed peoples. But I don't think that they necessarily sit side by side in this conversation. I think they're all part of this broader yarn.
Maria, Elena, you had a Catholic education. You spoke English, and it was confronting some of the things you heard. You have your own place-based languages, which of course speak to your own country, and the country speaks back to you through that language. How does it feel to actually have those two quite distinct language systems? You know, do you find you're shifting between them, or does, you know, you're here today on a stage with the rest of us, but you also have this incredible presence in your own country. What's that experience like? You know.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Because I just dozed off. I drifted somewhere else.
Okay. What's it like speaking English? What's it like speaking English compared to speaking Warlpiri?
Oh, yeah. Easy. Go to school every day. Learn about English and where it comes from, and, you know. I think, for me, I got it well balanced. I've got the Western education and my cultural education. So I balanced that. I built that bridge for myself, and I'm over them bridge. I go to and fro. I guess it made me more stronger to understand society, the government. When you're talking about the referendum and stuff, Australia sure did show us how they felt about us, First Nation mob, Murninarina mob. Balancing both languages plus many more, it's easy. Once you know who you are, where you're coming, and where you're going to go, it's easy. And my mom always say, make sure you use your manners along the way if you want to get up to the front. Use your manners. And I did that, and I achieved that. I worked extra hard for learning languages, and, language, was easy. Learning Warlpiri, Arunda, Pidginjara, Yangunjara, Lurija, Kaidija, all those languages. Was easy for me. But learning language, English, was a bit challenging, but I achieved it. And And when it comes to politics, you know, I automatically switch off. I'm not going to waste my oxygen on the media in Canberra. I have better thing to talk about. And also, I wanted to announce too that I'm here for another week. So, through the Running Water Community Press, I'm a publisher in training. So I'm looking forward to the challenge. Yeah, thank you.
I think at this stage we might take some questions, as I think people have got a lot to ask. I'm sorry, there's already a question. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all for your presentation. My name's Davina Woods. I'm Gugiyajungan, Gugiyalunji language group, and in Aboriginal English, Murray woman. Been living here on Wurundjeri country for the last 30 odd years. The job I came down here for was the Federal Aboriginal Education Officer of the Australian Education Union. It gave me an opportunity to travel around a lot of our communities and talk to a lot of our people. There's few stories I could talk to you about that relate to community language, but one that really is quite interesting, I'd like to know, particularly from you, Marie, your answer to it, is that I met with an academic who was working at, was then only the Northern Territory University, it hadn't become Charles Darwin, and he was a Tiwi Island man. And I was congratulating him on having received his master's. And he said, oh, that's okay, he says, but sis, when I go back to the islands, I'm still treated like a kid because I can only speak children's language. I've understood from a few different people while travelling around that there are levels of language that is tied to levels of knowledge, and that the levels of knowledge are tied to the dreaming. Do you have a comment on that, Marie?
Good question. The level of college is like depending on the ceremony that you attend. For me, I'm still in my high school stage of my cultural education. I don't get up to the universities where all the great nanas are, the PhD, the doctors. I'm still in my high school stage. And once I do the other term of women's ceremony and learning on country and songs and stuff, then with their permission, then I go to the first entry of my college, and that's how we look at our education system.
Brilliant, thank you. You've confirmed a lot for me.
Welcome.
This may not be appropriate. I'll say it anyway. Thanks for explaining that, and my readings tell me that's true, like anthropological readings. In the case of an endangered language, and I think there's a couple of Noongars, so you shout out if I'm getting this wrong. It concerns me to work too quickly to that idea of tiers of language, because it can be used, I said before, to exacerbate community tensions, and it can buy into lateral violence. And many of us, if we're at uni, like I am, I'm one of those PhDs, in some ways, if you've got community connections as well, you've got a bit of an unfair advantage over others because you're often relying on print and accessing these language materials. So, yeah, I get nervous when I fully believe that's true. There has to be other areas of earning respect at community level. That means caring, building the love, building people's capacity as well.
Shit on our culture.
I am not.
By saying that our levels that are related to what you know about the dreaming and all the laws.
I disagree wholeheartedly with you, and the reason being is because I think in my experience, Kim, and I don't have a PhD, and Arnie, I respect so wholeheartedly what you're saying, is that we have incredible elders in our community and a lot of really strong knowledge holders, but the opportunity for, while the men go through initiation still, the opportunity for women to go through initiation still in our community is quite complicated. We have to go over west and hang out with community on the west coast in order to be able to go through initiation, which isn't tied to our land in the same way. And so if I am going to be initiated in the same process, to be able to hold the knowledge and language, and I'm one of the more fluent speakers of the language that I live in and the town that I live in, then I would be, initiation-wise, much younger than the elders in my community, but I am more senior in my language teaching. And that's a direct result of colonisation. So I think it's a very nuanced and complex conversation, and I agree in both.
So is lateral violence, Kim. It's a product of bloody colonisation.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll have the conversation.
Exactly. No, I thank you for your passion. I certainly, it's not my intention to do anything like that, shitting on our culture, as you put it. I'm committed, and I think I've got a record of just the opposite. So I'm sorry if that was misunderstood.
One of the most remarkable things with Kim, this first book, True Country, it's quite an intriguing book and it's still my favourite book. But it was proposing almost, you know, the narrator was actually finding an Aboriginal language which wasn't located in country. It was quite an enigmatic ending, and what was remarkable about what you then did, you went back and built up connections with community, embedded yourself in community, and were willing to take the blows of what you might want to call community politics, and in order to produce those language books that you produced back in the early 2000s. So I know your work with language and community, and it's certainly been challenging as well. I guess one of the things sorry, there's a question down the back.
Not so much a question, a comment. Thank you. I'm Deb Dank. Marie, I'm countryman from Gudangji, Wakaya country, over the other side of Warramungumop. I'm a semiotician. I wrote a book that has become quite well known within the place. But my work, and I've got a PhD, my work explores how our languages, the real Australian languages, actually make sense. And I hear what Kim is saying, but my growing up was absolutely and utterly what Curly and Marie is talking about. But this is a perfect example of the issues of our cognitive functionality and trying to articulate our ways within the vocabulary of the colonial language. This colonial language that we're all struggling with is 1,500 years old, if we can be as gracious about it as we can. Our languages are more than 60,000 years old. So how can a language that is so very young actually begin to articulate the cognitive functionalities within this place? I have a book coming out soon around how very important it is as researchers for us to work with making our languages actually tell us and give us and let us hear all of that language, all of that knowledge that's embedded within the vocabulary. And because it's only after we've gone through those ceremonies, we've gone through all of those living milestones, that we then begin to have that other knowledge exposed to us. I'm at kindergarten level, sis. I'm at kindergarten level.
And the emotional and spiritual resonances of those ancient languages too. You have to go toward it once you start doing this sort of work. I think, especially on country, and with the inheritors of that language gathered around those. So that's my concern, is to build that for, you know, our communities like that.
All right, folks, I think we'll have to bring this to a conclusion now. I think we're right on time. Marie Lee is going to speak something.
Just want to talk to you there. He said, Kurunji, my sister was taken away by welfare, and she was given to Kurunji people, and she grew up in that Kurunji country. So in the 80s, I found out that I had a sister that was taken away by welfare. And we connected, and I found my long-lost sister, and we gained a new family. So I'm part of that Kurunji family as well. Old fellow Mr. Teddy grew my sister up. I don't know what really happened. I don't want to know. But the welfare took her away. And I have a lot of Kurunji friends. And yeah, I a little bit understand their language, but it's a mixture of Walpuri and something else. So Kurunji is a really easy language to learn. So like that's when I said, we're going to wrap it up, eh?
Let's give it up for our panellists, please.